Hey everyone, this is Curb Knight, and today it's time to finally finish off the last mag deck with Masques. So if you've seen the other two videos, you know the drill. New mag, 3 new decks. Let's see how each of them fare. So in terms of playability, I think Masques is kind of nestled somewhere between Mag Patriarch and Mag Elder. It definitely doesn't have the defensive power that Elder has, but it does have access to Persona, giving a little bit more burst power than Elder does. If you remember in that video, if you saw it, I did mention that Elder does lack a certain amount of kill power, which Masques definitely does compensate for. Of course, the problem is that this is a very combo-centric deck. You need to see a lot of pieces. You need to set your entire board up, but now the deck is a lot more flexible in the stuff that it can play. We have a lot of utility tools, and of course Patriarch itself, definitely does a lot for the deck in the sense that it gives it an actual turn 3 if it does have to go first. But obviously, being a mass deck, you're mired with a couple of those consistency issues because there's a lot of engine that you do have to play in the main deck, and that leaves a lot less space for non-engine. But, with that preamble aside, let's go ahead and just hop straight into the deck profile. Right, so starting off where we always do, we are, of course, just going to be playing the Magnolia ride line, the Neo Magnolia ride line. As always, Lotte is just your generic D-starter. Doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter as much that it's a Sylvan Horn Beast. It can technically come up because you have Patriarch with one other card that revives stuff, but just why wouldn't you just play Lotte? Then of course we have Karis. When he's written over by a grade 2 Sylvan Horn Beast, check top 3, call 1, and then either discard the rest or put them on the bottom of your deck. Most of the time they're going to go to the bottom deck because you're going to get like a trigger, and then one normal unit that you're going to be calling. Same issue with Patriarch and Elder. I think just Karis is just overall solid enough in this deck. He doesn't need to be replaced by Rancor Chain, although you definitely could, considering you are playing a couple of orders, but in this build specifically, we're not playing a high volume of them, so it's probably just better to stick to Karis. Maybe you plus, maybe you just don't. It's worth the risk. And then, of course, Lattice, not as useful in this deck. When he's written over by Magnolia, Soul Blast 1, choose grade 2 or greater card, or a normal order. We do have access to both in this deck, and then add it to your hand. And then, of course, he is a 15k beater while he is on board while you're on Magnolia. Of course, that Magnolia being Patriarch, the new one, when it's placed on Van, choose a Sylvan Horn Beast from your drop, just call it. If push comes to shove, you can always be Soul Blasting out the Lattice for his skill, and then you can just call back Lattice. We're not playing as many Sylvan Horn Beasts in this deck, so sometimes Lattice does end up being the call target a lot of the time. And then, of course, the main skill, which you're not really going to be using too much, just because we're planning to go second and swapping Vanguards as quickly as possible, which is that you can CB1 choose the same number of rear guards as your opponent's grade. They can attack from back row. And then, of course, if your opponent's on 3, everything gets 5k, and they can also intercept. There are some niche cases when you're actually using that skill, like say you're going second and you don't have enough Dragon Tree markers. You can totally just be like counter +1, choose 2, or choose 3. 2 or 3, they can attack from back row, and then you have 6 attacks even if you don't have 3 Dragon Tree markers quite set up. So there is some little bit of utility there in that sense. So just remember that you can do that. It doesn't come up that often because even if you can't attack with all of your units from back row, you're usually pretty fine with that. That just means you have boosters and stronger attacks. Alright, so moving on into the main deck, we are of course going to be playing the 4 copies of Magnolia Masques. Obviously, this is our main ride target. We do have to rewrite into this. We want to go second so that we can Masques into it. Magnolia's skill, of course, the typical Masques condition, it can only ride over a Magnolia grade 3. And then Kant, all of your guards on a Dragon Tree marker gain the ability to attack from the back row, as well as another 10k. So effectively what it does, it turns all your Dragon Tree markers into plus 15k, which really stacks, especially if you can add Persona Ride on top of that. So your board numbers can get pretty wild at some point. And then another skill, which is obviously only to be used once per game, which is remove a Magnolia with different card name. And then you gain the red text that when your rear guard attacks from the back row, choose rear guard, retire it. Sometimes comes up, but a lot of times in the meta, people aren't really caring too much about retire. But this is going to be the only main grade 3 that we're actually going to be playing in the deck. I was considering playing a couple more Patriarchs in the main deck because, say you Persona, if you don't see this, you could always Persona Ride, or theoretically, if you do see this, you can re-ride into Patriarch, get the on-ride skill. If you don't have the Dragon Tree markers, you can counterblast 1, give the attack from back row, and then just go back into Masques after that. But it was just a little bit too clunky. You know, we want it cut down on a little bit of slots that we would be using for actual combo pieces and shield, so we just went ahead and cut it. But by all means, if you do actually want to be playing a couple copies of Patriarch in the deck, I think that is definitely an okay choice. Maybe 1 or 2, probably no more than that, I would say. Continue on with grade 3s. Of course, we do have the Mask of Hydreigon. Check top 5 for a Masques or a Dragon Tree unit. And then, of course, the other skill from drop, if you have a grade 3 Vanguard without Masques, reveal a Mask from your hand, put this card to Soul Superior, ride it from your hand. And then, of course, if your opponent is on grade 3, you just activate Persona Ride, which is why we want to be going second. So, obviously, just Masques. You know, it's a Mask deck. You got to play 2. It's pretty much the agreed upon number. And then for our last grade 3, we're actually playing for our Regalis piece, the Fire Regalis. Technically, you could get away with playing orders, like you don't have to play this every single turn. But just the fact that we are such a combo-centric deck, having the Fire Regalis just is really, really invaluable. It helps so much with just the ability to, you know, find combo pieces, find our wretches, find ways to create more Dragon Tree markers, which isn't really too difficult in this deck. You just have to see one, and then it is possible to kind of just loop it over and over again, assuming you see the right cards. So speaking of ways to get our Dragon Tree markers, of course, we are going to be playing 4 copies of the Depth Illwith. Of course, this is just the Dragon Tree Maker / Mask Searcher for Stoicheia. On place, CB1, Soul Blast 1, choose a rear guard without any Dragon Tree markers, place a Dragon Tree marker, then you may search the Masques. Obviously, this is one of our combo pieces. It's searching out our Masques, getting us all set up, giving us a Dragon Tree marker, which of course we're going to put in the back row so that we can have something attack from the back row. This is actually going to be our only generator. Obviously, within Stoicheia, there's only you only have access to 8 copies of generators. So we're just going to be playing this guy as our sole generator. And like I said, even if you don't get them all, if you don't get 3 set up in the back row, you're actually still fine most of the time, just because you're going to be giving Persona Ride to back row, which is at least going to be empowering the rear guards in front of them, assuming there's a grade 1 in that slot. All right, so our next combo piece is actually going to be 3 copies of Ilkilwyn. So this is one of the few other Sylvanhorn beasts we are actually playing in the deck. When he is placed on rear, as long as you're on Magnolia, grade 3 guard, you can Soul Blast 1, discard a card, so search your deck or drop for a Magnolia with a different card name than your current Vanguard. Or you can also add a grade 0 order, but of course we're not actually going to be playing any in this deck. So this is typically what you're going to be calling off of Patriarch skill. If you see this in the early game, you're totally cool to just like toss it because you're just going to be calling it back, searching out the Magnolia Masques, and then you're golden as long as you can find the Mask as well, which is effectively we're playing 6 copies of it because we have this to search it, and then of course the 2 copies if we unfortunately draw into it. But this is also one of the main reasons I was considering playing more Patriarch, because literally by riding the Patriarch you can call this back. So there was a bit of a loop where you can just call this back, and then let's say you rewrite Patriarch over Masques, you call this back, search out another copy of Masques, or theoretically even the same one, you can Soul Blast out the Masques that you write over and then just add it back because it's a different name now. So there's a lot of fun interactions with this card if you're playing extra Patriarchs in the main deck. As I said, I wanted more room for combo pieces, which this deck is. This deck is kind of just oops all combo. All right, so moving on from that, we have a little bit of, I guess, non-engine. Of course, we're just been playing 2 copies of Maldiva. Maldiva is a very solid card, a promo, and it got reprinted recently, so it should be pretty cheap. But Unfortunately, you do have to be on Magnolia Masques in order for any of the effects to be live, so you can't just call it off of Patriarch, even though it is a Sylvan Horn Beast. But basically, when it's placed on rear, Soul Blast 1, it gets 5k, and then if you haven't countercharged yet this turn, you may countercharge 1. But the main skill is that when it intercepts, it can intercept from the back row, and when it does, it gets an extra 5k shield for each of your Dragon Tree markers. So that just allows you to have a lot of extra shield, which is something this deck definitely does struggle with quite a bit. There can be games where you end up with like 2 or 3 Magnolia Masques in your hand and you're like, oh crap, I don't have any shield. But this being at least a 10k shield most of the time, bumping up to like 15, 20, depending on how lucky you've been getting with the depth Illwiths, is very nice. Of course, you know, being on board, it is susceptible to retire. There isn't a whole lot of it going around, especially for the back row right now, but that is definitely something to consider. A lot of your shield is going to be end up staying on board. Of course, one of those pieces of shield being Maldiva itself. All right, moving on, we are actually just going to go ahead and be playing our Ace unit for Stoicheia. The Ace unit for Stoicheia just goes top 7, mill 1 for EB3, and then she gets another 5k, and you revive something from your drop. Not exactly in that order, I kind of butchered it, but that's effectively what it does. And then her condition, you know, if your opponent's on grade 3, she just gets 5k, and then if you have 10 or more cards in your drop, she gets another 5k. So filtering, like I said, we're a combo deck, so being able to filter anything out, using this on turn 2, calling a dip Illwith, using this, milling this so that we can call it next turn, is also very good as well. So just overall solid card. We have the energy for it, so, you know, might as well play it. The other main user of energy is going to be 2 copies of Lilikoi. This is another card where your shield is mainly on board because when you place on rear, as long as it's not the battle phase, EB3, and then either reborn a Sylvanhorn Beast, or specifically since you're playing Magnolia Masques, he can actually reborn the Depth Illwith as well. But of course, you do actually have to be on Masques in order to do that. And then his other skill, which is also very useful, retire him, give something 10k, or give something being attacked 10k. So with the combination of these 2 cards, a lot of your shield does end up being on the board, which is pretty bad. If you go up into something that can actually just retire your board, you end up losing a lot of shield value from, you know, just them getting rid of your board. And then for our last 2 slots in the grade 2 department, we are just going to be playing 2 copies of Force Grow Dragon. Now, I'm not a huge fan of Force Grow. I think he is a bit gimmicky because when he's placed on rear, if you are on Magnolia Masques, you can counterblast 1, and then you can choose any number of cards from your drop as long as they're grade 3 or greater and call them, but you can only call up to the number of Dragon Tree markers that you currently have. So Force Grow is either the best card in the deck or the worst card in the deck, depending on how far you are and how lucky you're getting with your Depth Illwiths. So he's really good at rebuilding your board if it gets like retired. 1 Force Grow can just literally just explode your board and kill your opponent when they weren't expecting it. He does have another skill when he attacks, which he gives your Vanguard 5k, which is nice, I guess. It makes it hit magic number. But the fact that he's most of the time just gonna be like a 20k attacker from the front row, or if you put him in the back row, obviously he's gonna be bigger. But it kind of just makes me not really like him as much. He's also not a Sylvanhorn Beast, so you can't get him back off of Lilikoi. There's just like so many things that make me not really like him, but when you see him and he pops off, he feels really good. So moving on to the gray ones, of course, we are going to be playing 4 copies of the Cinceret. Now, Cinceret is just a very solid card, and especially in this deck, when it's discarded from your hand to ride, you can either Soul Blast 1 or EB3. Most of the time, we're going to be Energy Blasting 3. But you just draw a card and it stays in drop. Because while you are on a Magnolia Vanguard, you can put it to the bottom of the deck, choose one of your rares, it becomes base 15. But if you Persona Road instead, it becomes 20k. So this card is absolutely insane in this deck. Obviously, we can Persona Ride on turn 3, which means that we can get that plus 20k, slap that 20k on top of a Dragon Tree marker under Magnolia Mask that puts it up to 25, 35k base. If you have a Sayrol on board, that makes it 45k base, which is just absolutely insane, especially for your first grade 3 turn. You don't always want to just like shotgun all of your Cincerets if you don't think you can kill, but of course, you know, throwing up one on a really important rear guard is going to hurt your opponent very, very much. And speaking of Sayro, of course, we're just going to be playing 3 copies. It tends to be the agreed upon amount to just play 3 Sayro, and I definitely do have to agree. He's very solid. He is, when he's placed on rear from deck or hand, Soul Blast 1, checked out 5 for Magnolia. I'll be honest, you're never going to use that skill. You would always rather use the Soul Kill Win instead of, a gimmicky search of top 5. Main reason we're playing him is that while you are on Magnolia, all of your Persona Ride increases the back row as well. Of course, that includes if you are Persona riding with Magnolia Masques as well. So that's how you can get your back row rear guards up to 45k with the Cinceret. Now, in order to make the most out of our power, I'm actually going to be playing 2 copies of Mayarasi here. Mayarasi definitely is very, very solid in the deck, especially if you hit it with the Cinceret. 45k is nasty, and it's especially nasty when it becomes a booster for 20k rear guard in front of it, making that a 65k swing at your opponent's Vanguard. While they're still a grade 3 before they've had their really big push turn probably, and it's just really nasty. Right, so finishing off with some of the just basic stuff, of course, we are just gonna be playing the 4 PGs, the 1 Elementaria. Obviously Elementaria is kind of just, whatever. Always want to be playing it just in case. Doesn't really make too much of a difference in this deck. Now, for our trigger lineup, we are actually going to be just playing 7 critical here, because we do actually want to make room for 4 soul in front. Now, you might think, wait, you get 2 free soul when you ride up into Magnolia Masques. Why do you need so much extra soul? The real answer is that you just gobble up so much soul in this deck. If we just think about all the things that are using soul, your ride line is using 1 soul. If we look at our grade 2 lineup, Ilkilwin uses 1 soul. Maldiva, if we use it, uses a soul. We have, of course, our most important card, the Depth Illwith, all consuming a soul. We technically have Cinceret, who is also can potentially be using a soul if you draw on the first turn. You're just using up so much soul in the early game. You kind of just want to have that extra bit of soul for the later game. Like say you do draw into a Maldiva, you want to be able to use all the effects. So playing soul in front kind of just guarantees that you have enough soul for everything. And trust me, it is definitely worth it to be playing them. And then of course our basic stuff, of course, just playing the 4 regular heals. As always, if you want to be playing counter heals, go for it. I'm not going to stop you. And then for Overture, just going to be playing the Stoicheia Overture. Obviously, I tend to like red OT in Magnolia specifically. We are playing the Mayarasi, so you could theoretically play that as well. But I think just like for this deck specifically, the fact that your front row is not getting as powerful, the extra front from the Stoicheia OT is definitely very much appreciated. All right, so that's going to do it for my deck profile for Magnolia Masques. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to do those YouTube things, like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.